Hello, everyone. This is John from Of Story and Song, and today I wanted to go over 5 key things to keep in mind before writing a book slash outlining a book. The first one is the inner work. Now, by inner work, what I mean is really entering this state of contemplation where you're considering what it is you want to tell in writing a book, why you want to write a book, and if there's anything in you that might come out while writing that you still need to work on. And the reason I start with this, and I think it's very important because both in my own writing and reading a lot of people's work throughout the years, I've noticed that if there's kind of one thing troubling you or that you haven't really resolved in your own life, it can continuously come up in your work and in your writing. Now, in some ways, this is a good thing. If you're just kind of starting out writing and you're doing your own thing, you can actually notice it through your writing in a way that you might not have noticed it through any other thing. So there can be a lot of benefit from that, from discovering these things that really form patterns in our life and that trouble us through our writing. But also at the same time, it can jeopardize it if we want to write something that's more plot centric or that's a little bit more complicated, because we can kind of get bogged down and fixated on this one thing that really is unresolved in our own life. So I think really taking the time to do that inner work, contemplation, maybe even speaking with a therapist really can help you understand yourself more so that through that self understanding, you can help relay that in a story. Number two is a little bit of the opposite. So it's the external work. So this is something like traveling, going outside to exercise, just going to bars, restaurants, places where you're having conversations with people, seeing different environments and all that. So if you're in a desert setting, really get to know what the desert landscape looks like. And if you're in a forest and it's hot and humid, really experience all the sensations that you're feeling, all the elements of the forest that you're walking through. Because a story is really a balance throughout the entire time. You're balancing the the struggles of the characters, but you're also grounding them in a place, in a time, in a setting. So the more you can take a notepad, whether you internally note it or you have a notepad and you're physically writing it down, just start experiencing the world and taking note of all these things and trying to write about them in an interesting way. And all these experiences in your own life are common experiences that you can write about in your book. Because anyone who's going to read your book, whether it's a contemporary novel or if it's a fantasy novel that is in a fictional world or takes place thousands of years ago, there's some common human element that if you're writing it and other people are reading it, bridges that gap. So learn about the external world, balance that with the first step, going into the internal world. And if you have that strong foundation, you'll be at a great place to start outlining a book. So, having said that, step three, I would say, is formulate your characters. So, when you're thinking about a book, no matter if it's a character centered book or if it's a plot centered book, your characters really make or break the book. Even if it's plot centered, an uninteresting character or an unrealistic character is always going to make a reader kind of squinch their face like that and say, why would they do that? Or, they're acting in a strange way. Because what happens if you impose your own will on the characters, or if every character is just a representative of you, the readers are really going to pick up on that. So now that you've done the internal work, the external work, you have this sense of self, you have this idea of having conversations with other people, you have so many more colors in your painting palette, so to speak. And this is really what you're going to want to use to develop a character with. You're going to use the internal journey that you've done with yourself to understand what motivates people. What do people really want in life? What do they struggle with? What do they flourish with? And with the external part, now that you've been communicating with people, whether it's traveling or just listening to other people's life stories, having that flow of conversation, you're going to better understand dialogue and how people actually talk with each other, as opposed to how they talk when poor writing is just trying to force conversation to move the plot ahead. When you have that natural experience, it's really going to help develop a complex character. And the more you can read great books too, it's just going to continuously give you examples of interesting human beings to base your own characters off. Step 4 would be setting. So you're really going to use the experience you took from traveling different places. And also, I want to make a note, if you have like chronic health conditions or you really don't have the means to travel, watching documentaries is a great way to learn, YouTube videos, documentaries. Just search out different landscapes, search out different countries, places you might be interested in, and just same thing, take notes, read books of people describing it. Really, you're just going to want to learn how to describe places and really ground things. So, after you've developed characters or have an idea for the characters for your book, start sketching out landscapes, writing descriptions. It doesn't have to be specific, but you're just practicing writing interesting locations, because the more you kind of write these small ideas over time, it builds in your head. It's like scaffolding. It's like you're building a building. It's like you're scaffolding this story that just slowly takes root. And with some people, sometimes they just get a huge burst of an idea. But with a lot of other people, it takes a long time to develop a story. So really focus on the setting and grounding your characters so that they're real and they're not just, these um, archetypes or figments of your imagination. Put them somewhere. And when you have characters in a setting, that's when you're really going to have a strong base to figure out what the plot's going to be and how everything's going to start interacting with each other. So that leads us to step 5, and that's setting the plot. Now, plot is such a huge topic to tackle that, I'm sure you can find a ton of videos on the internet that go into all the different ways to build your plot. So I'm not going to focus on that here because honestly, they can probably do it better. The one thing I do want to say about plot, though, why I saved it for last and how it fits into everything else I said, is that how I tackle plot in outlining is that when I'm setting the plot and I'm sketching everything out, my story idea, I put things into 3 different highlighted sections. So I write out the outline, and then at the end of that, I highlight based on 3 different scales. So in yellow, I will highlight things that are necessary. So when I sketch it out in the outline, I say, I need to write it exactly like I just outlined this because this is imperative for the story. The second, I outline in blue. And with this one, this is a little bit of both. So there are necessary parts of this section or this chapter that I'm outlining, but there's also wiggle room for it. And then the third, I will outline in green. And with these chapters, I'll still have something because it's, I don't just have large chunks of green highlighting where there's just nothing there. But you put a very vague kind of fuzzy idea and you highlight in green, and basically you're setting room for improvisation at that point. It's acknowledging that at that point in the story, your characters and what's happening, it's probably going to be in a very fluid space because you can't control everything from start to finish. It's very hard to do that, at least on the first draft. If you're writing complex characters, really great characters, throughout the writing process, they're going to do things that you did not expect coming. That's what it means to really have them be their own creation as opposed to just your will imposed on them throughout the story. So really with plot, it's I'm not giving a ton of advice. More so, my advice is just to potentially use that same highlighting scale that I do, and to not think of things in terms of like, oh, I either have to be a plotter or a pantser. I think honestly, every story has a little bit of both, and whether that's 90%, 10%, or 50-50, I don't think anything can really be completely pantsed or completely plotted. I think it's a little bit of both. And so if you acknowledge that and just kind of like incorporate that into your outline and use it with highlighting, it makes it a lot easier to navigate as you're writing as opposed to just kind of having the two ideas confused the entire time. So I hope that all helps. There's a lot that goes into outlining a book. There's a lot that goes into writing a book, but these are just 5 steps that are great to keep in mind as you're going through the process, whether you're still thinking of whether you even want to write a book or you're just about to sit down and kind of start outlining and give your first crack at it. So I hope this helped. Stay tuned for more writing advice. I'd really appreciate it if you click like and subscribe. More content coming soon for writing advice, reviewing of books, some podcasts. We even dive into music a little bit. Um, let's talk about how art all blends together and create a shared experience. So, thanks for tuning in. Bye.